I will thank Nefarious and Pope Exorcist for giving me the idea to have this conversation with Mike because, once again, I love exorcism movies. I really do. There is not a film, there's not too many films I like more than the original 1973 The Exorcist. William Friedkin is probably a top 50, top 25 director of all time. This is based off a book that William Peter Blatty's book, which used as source material actual notes from an exorcism that actually happened. And this introduced the world to this concept of exorcism having to cast out the devil. There had been ghost stories before and things like that, but it was all ooh, it was really corny stuff. And then the Exorcist hits. People are running out of theaters, throwing up in theaters. I found this out today from a podcast, The Exorcist Files, I've been listening to as well. Mike, what do you think about this? The Ouija board was the number one board game in the world at the time The Exorcist came out. The Ouija board in The Exorcist helps to bring out this demon or invite this demon into this house. It dropped precipitously, like it basically almost put Ouija board out of business. This movie, which is crazy.
That's amazing.
That type of cultural,
That's amazing.
cultural impact. I can talk about The Exorcist all day. What do you think about The Exorcist, Mike?
Yeah, I think The Exorcist, definitely, like you said, it's definitely a good film. But I don't know, when I saw it, I was in middle school, I believe, for the first time, and I saw it on TV as well. So I didn't even see like the uncut version of it. So a lot of it was edited. So I think by that point in time, it really didn't get to me, but I did see the inspiration that other films got from it. Yeah, I respect it for what it has done and what it has influenced. But as far as it being up there for me and getting me scared, it didn't, just because, it was such an older film and I was like in middle school. So I'm like, that point in time, I'm like, okay, this is not scary to me. I don't see what my mom was so scared about when she saw it.
I saw this movie in the theater maybe 10, I guess it probably was 10 years ago because it was probably for the 40th anniversary. It went back in the theaters. So I saw it on IMAX. And it looked just as good as The Conjuring or anything else. I mean, it's really incredible how they do the practical effects. I don't know what you saw on TV that would be permissible for TV, because this is a hard R film with some of the stuff that they show. But what The Exorcism does also is that it gave us a set of rules. And the rules tell us how these films are supposed to go about. So the first thing you see in these films, not all films, but this is something that you see in most of them, is that when you have a demonic possession movie, it doesn't even have to be an exorcist movie. Exorcism movie has to have an exorcist in it. Just that's like a duh. But you do have demonic possession films that don't have exorcists in them. And you see, even in these films, this type of setup. So they follow the stages of demonic possession that's given out by the Catholic Church. The first thing that you see is the infestation. So after a demon or whatever finds its way into the house or gets attached to somebody, that's when you start seeing the doors crack and the stuff fly around the room, and cabinets open and shut, things get misplaced, those types of things. You've seen that in pretty much any supernatural film, really, that happens. The second thing happens is oppression. This is physical attacks. People get really sick. People start to develop like whelps on their body. You start to see the demon try to enact violence on somebody. So they throw something at somebody, that type of thing. You start to see animals show up dead. So oppression happens. Obsession happens where the person who's being possessed is just kind of out of it. They're distant. It's just sleeping all the time. They're unresponsive. And then finally, possession. That's when the demon takes control. That's when you get the head spinning around and the levitation and the cussing you out and the deep voices and all that type of stuff. So those are the 4 stages that are presented by the church. Michael, how many times do you see that in films, and how effective do you think it is?
Oh, I've seen that in a lot of films, dealing especially with the supernatural ones that you mentioned. I think that it's not as effective anymore just because it's been done so many times. Unless somebody has like a spin on it, then I'm like, okay, I'm down with this. But for the most part, like you said, it's pretty much like copy and paste currently. So I mean, there are a few films that put their own spin on it, take it a different route, which keeps things interesting. But yeah, this is a good guideline.
That's kind of the problem with these movies, is that you see this first with The Exorcist, and The Exorcist does it so well. In fact, all of these tropes I'm going to talk about, they originate in The Exorcist, and they do it so well that it becomes very predictable. No matter how many jump scares you put into a film, or how creative some of those jump scares are, some of the creepy things that you do in the film, it has this diminishing return in these films because we've seen it over and over and over again. We have 50 years of Exorcist, demonic possession, and supernatural films to pull from. So it's kind of hard to get scared by these things unless they're done very, very well. The other thing that you see in a lot of films, not all of them, but there's some sort of crisis of faith. Either the priest or the minister that's doing the exorcism, a family member, usually your main character, the mother, the father. There's some sort of skeptic that's involved with it that doesn't believe in anything. You see this type of person in all these films as well. That's a very common archetype in horror movies in general, but especially these possession films. They have to use the Roman ritual in a lot of these films. That's the power of Christ compels you. You know, those types of like really long prayers where they're trying to get the demon to say their name. You're seeing the possessed basically just wig out and do all kind of crazy stuff. And that's the battle. You see the spiritual battle between the possessed and the exorcist, and they're normally Catholic, and it's normally following the Roman ritual. You always see, I think this is like an always thing, where the demon makes the person who's doing the exorcism see something in their past, or see something that they did they didn't have no business doing, or something that they feel bad about, to try to throw them off their game.
Her heart. Can you give her something? She's going to coma.
Είσαι πολύ κουρασμένος. Να πας στο κρεβάτι σου.
You're not my mother! Don't listen.
Why, Timmy?
Damien.
Timmy, please.
And then they just lie to them and tell them that they're trash and they're shit and all this other stuff. So those are the main ones. There's some other stuff from these films, but these are the ones I wanted to focus on.
Especially important is the warning to avoid conversations with a demon. We may ask what is relevant, but anything beyond that is dangerous. He's a liar. The demon is a liar. He will like to confuse us. But he will also mix lies with the truth to attack us. The attack is psychological, Damien, and powerful.
I just went through all 5. What are your reactions to those, Mike?
Yeah, definitely. And there was actually one film that I can't recall. I can't think of the name right now, but it like put a spin on it as opposed to being more like in the Catholic faith. It was dealing with the Jewish faith. Do you remember that film that I'm talking about? It came out in the mid-2000s.
I do. It's called The Possession. It's called The Possession. And they used the Jewish exorcist instead of a Catholic exorcist, which was something that you have to do, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well, that you have to kind of get out of the Catholic space for these movies to be novel and to be unique. Unfortunately, The Possession I thought was really, really bad outside of the it's actually like a Jewish faith instead of the Catholic faith. Outside of that, I think that the execution of that film was pretty bad. But that was at least interesting, you know, because you had never seen those types of rituals or prayers or beliefs. There's a lot of exposition in that film. I think they feel like they had to do a lot of exposition because nobody has ever seen a Jewish exorcism before, or know the Jewish faith around exorcism. So there's a lot of exposition in that film that try to explain kind of what they're doing, and that was interesting. But the characters were terrible. It's the main thing, you know.
I think another one too. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's good. That's good. Go ahead.
I was going to say another one film too. I think it was like one of your top films for that year. There's a Netflix film. It's like His House or something like that. You remember that one? That dealt with possession as well, but it was different too. It took a novel approach to it.
Yeah, but it's based off a very old African type of. I wish I could remember because I did look it up later on, like what type of faith it's connected to. It's something similar, like the faith that demon or whatever was connected to. That witch, it was like a witch doctor.
Yeah,
is connected to some stuff that happens in the Caribbean too, in terms of some of the it's not voodoo, but it's like voodoo adjacent. Like it's some of the stuff that kind of helped to create voodoo, I guess. Yeah, so that would be another good example. I'm gonna think about that. I should have put that on the list of something to watch out. But yeah, His House is great because it's different and it's giving you something that you don't understand immediately, as opposed to some of these other films. So yeah, so the blueprint for the Exorcism films is right there. The issue, once again, is that it's unlike other slasher movies or splatter films, body horror. All those have their tropes as well, but they're not as strict and binding as these. So you can still make some pretty creative films with slashers. Or I mean, slashers, for example, you know you're gonna have a final girl in all slasher films. Almost, it's a final girl. Sometimes they kill the final girl off as the final guy, but that's very, very rare, and it tends to not be received well. A lot of times, slasher films nowadays, they'll have multiple women in the movie that are kind of all main characters, so you don't know who the final girl is going to be, or they'll just have like Scream have multiple final girls, if you will. So, but they're not as constrictive. So I feel like you have to really challenge the form for Exorcism movies to be good. Now, I say that Exorcist movies are really hard to pull off, but there's a lot of them that were pulled off pretty well. We're going to talk about some of those right now, starting with